Hello everyone, welcome to another video on the channel. Welcome to a tips and advice Gran Turismo 7 video. In this one we're going to look at a subject I don't think we've ever looked at before. I don't actually ever recall maybe even MD else covering this subject, but it's essentially I'm going to kind of pass on some tips and advice, tricks, techniques etc on how to avoid those dreaded contact penalties. So with Gran Turismo 7 we do have the return of the penalty system. In general, in my opinion, it is working quite well, definitely picking up the dirty drivers and the sloppy driving if you like, but on occasion, as with any penalty system in any game, and let's be honest, in real life, when it's stewards obviously making a decision, it can make the odd wrong decision, and more likely the sort of decisions that are annoying you are the ones that feel a little bit harsh. So as I said, in this video I'm going to kind of pass on some of the techniques that I use and some of the other drivers that I've seen use to try and avoid those penalties that can really feel quite harsh, annoying, and can ultimately destroy your race. Now, disclaimer, the techniques shown here are not going to make you impervious to the penalty system. I don't think there's anything that is entirely possible in that regard. So you will still pick up the occasional bad penalty. And again, this is not techniques to try and stop you getting penalties that you deserve, because in a lot of cases the things that we're going to see in this video, the penalties are deserved that people get, but just by following some practices, techniques, and kind of maybe a little bit of knowledge I might be able to pass on, I can help you to avoid getting those penalties more often than not. And then of course that should then help you kind of develop as a driver, help you start getting better results, and then hopefully move up those rankings. So yeah, that is the purpose of this one. It's going to be a fairly long video, I must add, so do stick with me because I think there's some good stuff in here, and as I said, hopefully it can help some of you guys out there who are maybe having trouble with the penalty system, maybe feeling it's rubbing you up the wrong way, or you're not kind of quite understanding why you're maybe getting some of these penalties. So I think some of the techniques in here should help you if you are a driver like that. But the first thing you have to do when it comes to the penalty system is to understand why you're getting the penalties you are. What are the sort of circumstances and the kind of contacts with other cars that are going to pick you up penalties that you can avoid getting? And the first one of them is going to be the rear tap, or the booty tap if you like. So coming into a braking zone, we've got a Peugeot RCZ here, Subaru ahead into a tight hairpin, and yeah, it makes contact with the back of the Subaru. Doesn't really affect the other car in too much, too much at all, but the Peugeot RCZ here picks up a 2-second penalty. In this instant here, we have myself come into one of the hairpins at Daytona as a bit of a concertina effect, and fairly large contact between several cars there. We pick up a 2-second penalty, the car behind me picked up a 2-second penalty, and the car in front of me picked up a 2-second penalty, and somewhat ironic, the car that I think actually caused the incident didn't get a penalty at all. Another example here of the rear end, coming into a braking zone, turn 1 at Austria, little tap on the car in front, doesn't really affect any of the cars involved, but the Z4 here is going to pick up that 2-second penalty. Frustrating, harsh you might say, but ultimately kind of deserved because you have rear-ended another car. Now the other very, very annoying penalty that I can maybe help you avoid getting is getting involved in somebody else's accident. So this is me coming into turn 1 at Austria once again in the Toyota FT1. Now the Z4 goes a little bit wide, makes contact with the Subaru. Not really a lot we could do to avoid the contact there. Make contact with the Z4, it goes off the track, and we get a 5-second penalty because the game has basically decided that we have punted that car off the track. Even though it wasn't the case, we know the penalty system won't always get everything right, and the booty tap penalties are annoying, but getting this kind of penalty is even more annoying. So let's move on to some of the techniques and some of the kind of strategies that I use to avoid getting these penalties. And the first one is just learning how to read situations in front of you. We've got a 4GT coming down the Kemmel Straight here at Spa, coming into Les Combes, and you can see as we come into the braking zone that this 4GT has 3 cars ahead of it going side by side into a relatively slow corner. So this driver should be telling themselves the cars are going to go through that corner very, very slowly. I need to prepare myself for them going through the corner in a slightly awkward fashion, and be able to adapt to the circumstances. So probably maybe braking a little bit early, over slowing the car, and then just judging your driving by what those cars are doing. But what you're going to see here is the Ford GT just essentially goes in as normal, makes contact with one of the other cars, and it's obviously accidental because they appear to let that car back through, but they pick up a 2-second penalty because of that contact. And that was an easily avoided penalty if the Ford GT had just read the situation a little bit better and adapted their driving accordingly. So moving on to an example of me reading the situation, adapting my driving and essentially avoiding an incident and avoiding that penalty. So coming into turn 1 at Daytona, up ahead I can see three cars in front, and has a McLaren that has gone wide at turn 1. It's attempting to make the overtake around the outside of the Subaru. So I'm telling myself at this point, this looks like we're going to have a little bit of an incident in front of us. Sure enough, the Jaguar and the McLaren are going to make contact here. So there's definitely something about to unfold in front of my car. Now we're pretty much in an acceleration zone at this point, but as we pause the footage here, you can see as they start to have their accident, we're actually off the throttle and even a little bit on the brake as I try to work out what these two cars in front of me are going to do. Going forward a little bit more, still on the brake a little bit, getting back on the throttle because I can see the McLaren's going off to the left hand side, so I think the McLaren's going to clear me, but I'm not entirely sure what that Jaguar is going to do. So as we jump forward just a little bit more, we can see the Jaguar now looks like it's going to spear off to the right hand side. At full speed I can tell that Jaguar is going off the track. The track has opened up, we can accelerate through the corner as normal. Now we did have to hit the brakes and slow down into an acceleration zone, but we avoided contact with those two cars. Had we made contact with one of them, as we've seen from the example with the FT1 at Austria, there's a very decent chance we pick up a contact penalty, a 5-second penalty. This was a GTWS race, a 5-second penalty at Daytona is race over. So moving on to another technique, we're going to look at this one quite a lot because this is a very, very good technique for avoiding those rear end taps, and it's offline braking. So essentially you brake off the line of the car in front of you to just give yourself that much, it just gives you a little bit more reaction time. If they brake a little bit early, then you've got space between your car to then take a different line and adjust your braking accordingly. You're going to see another example here into turn 1, just coming into the braking zone, we just move off to the right hand side there. Once we come into the braking zone, we just kind of diagonally come across the track to take the normal line, and it just gives me that split second more that I might need if the car in front of me takes me by surprise by braking a little bit early. So we're going to look at a situation that unfolds over a couple of corners. Coming into turn 1 at Austria again, we had two cars going side by side, so reading that situation I was fairly certain those cars were going to exit the corner a little bit slow. As they did, we actually did make contact with the car in front, but it was actually in an acceleration zone, so we don't get a penalty for that. Again, they're still going to go side by side up here into the hairpin. Now we did brake offline of the car in front. It did catch us out with the braking a little bit more, but because we weren't immediately behind that car, we were able to then just move to the right hand side. We never went for a dive bomb, it wasn't even an attempt at the overtake, but just to give both the cars a little bit of space to get through the corner. Again, coming down in here to turn 3, we broke offline of the car in front. He had kind of caught us out in the previous corner, but then we moved diagonally over onto the racing line, and it's just about giving yourself that little half second more, that little gap between the cars to give yourself time to adjust and react to what the driver in front of you is doing. As an example here of other drivers doing the exact same thing, we've got the Hungarian driver Tom here, who is a friend of the channel. That's my car in front of him, braking offline into the hairpin at Austria. And another example here, we have the Z4 and a 97 Supra coming into the braking zone. The Z4's not going for the overtake here, he just wants to move offline into the braking zone so he doesn't rear end that Supra and effectively ruin his race and possibly the Supra's race at the same time. They were only in lap 3 of a 16 lap race, so there's no point taking that kind of risk of rear-ending another driver, getting a penalty and ruining your race. Another GTWS race here at Tokyo. You can see we're not looking for the overtake here on the car in front. I just went to the inside there. I just don't want a car in front of me as we come into this big braking zone. It's very early on in the race, big crowd of cars there. Again, don't want to pick up a penalty this early into the race because it will be pretty much race over. And again, coming into the hairpin at the end of lap 2, this again is not an attempt at an overtake. I'm just moving my car off the line of the car in front so I don't have that obstacle in front of me, and I can be a lot more confident, brake into the space, react to what the cars around me are doing. And yeah, fantastic technique, offline braking, really good technique to start using if you're having a lot of bumps on other cars and picking up those rear end tapping penalties. Another technique that I do like to use is to minimise loss when being overtaken. So for example here, this driver behind me at Austria again appeared to be much faster than me. I think they'd actually served a penalty. They had qualified ahead and then they were coming back through. So come down into turn 3 here. He goes for the inside. I just brake literally 10 metres early. It just means that when it comes to the turn in part of the corner, that car's well ahead of mine and I can turn into the corner normally. And really why I'm doing that is that I don't want these 3 cars behind me getting too close to me, because the moment you get into a battle with another car, you risk contact penalties. So if I can minimise the loss of a quicker driver going by me, I will do it. I've done it many times. Another example here is a GTWS race. We've got a fellow Mercedes behind us. Now James here was much quicker than us, so again I think he'd served a penalty and that's why we're ahead of him. As we come up the hill, he's going to go for the move into the inside. We brake a little bit early, let him take the racing line. By the time we have to turn in for the corner, we can essentially take the corner pretty much normally. We lose maybe a tenth, a couple of attempts in the process. Have we try and brake at our normal point, we then go side by side through that corner and we both just lose half a second, 7 attempts. If there's cars behind us, they're back in the battle, and that's not exactly what I want in the early stages of the race. The early stages of the race is all about getting the order sorted out, pulling away, do the fighting towards the end of the race, and that's that's always the way I race. The early stages of the race are just about getting positions sorted out. We actually stayed behind that fellow Mercedes there for a period of time and actually picked up a couple of tricks on how to get around this track quicker. So actually letting that car in front actually had a double benefit. Another example here is it's the same track as a different split here, a different time split I guess for doing this race. Now the driver behind me here was clearly not fuel saving. This was a fuel saving race. He had looked pretty racy behind me, so I just let him get past me, because again, as we were looking behind us there, you can see that big gaggle of cars. I don't want them involved with me in this race at this early stages. I just want to get away from them. So yeah, we minimise our loss to the car overtaking us and we don't have to worry too much about that group of cars, and we'll sort the positions out towards the end of the race when it makes more sense to fight. Now, last little bit of advice I'm going to give for this one is do not be a nose poker. So we join Walid here in the Atenza at Catalunya. Now you can already see he kind of put his nose into a little bit of a silly position on the Atenza in front, even before the race had really started. Slowed him down on the X of the corner, so that's my Nissan GTR moving in ahead of him. You can see an example there of me braking offline to make sure I don't hit the car in front. Now it does compromise our speed a little bit into the next complex of corners, and while he kind of pokes his nose in there, pokes a pixel into that space there and actually spins us out. Now we didn't go off the track, so he doesn't actually pick up a contact penalty for his troubles, but yeah, he's then going to do exactly the same thing again to me a couple of laps later. We had overtaken him, puts his nose in here in a really stupid place at the last corner. Again, just a couple of pixels off his car there, and with Gran Turismo 7's kind of renewed contact physics, if you're going to constantly make those kind of moves, constantly poke your nose into corners, you're going to spin cars out and you're going to pick up penalties. And this old adage of putting your car in, not every space or every door that you see open is a door you want to be walking through, because you have to pick your time. You just have to kind of learn when it's right to try and put your car alongside another car. And I watched Walid's race after that, because I thought, yeah, that's a dirty driver, he's taken me out twice, but to be honest with you, he just wasn't a good driver. And I hate to say, I don't mean that in a kind of condescending way, he just didn't really understand how to place his car on the track in certain situations. And yeah, he's going to pick up a lot of penalties if that's the way he drives. He actually did pick up a penalty later on in that race and rage quitted, so it didn't work out for him in the end. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's as much advice as I'm going to give at this point. I could probably talk about this kind of subject for another half an hour, showing more examples, but the video is already getting towards that 15-minute mark. So this is the techniques that I use to avoid contact penalties. I think they serve me quite well. I think anyone that's watched me live streaming will be able to testify to that. We do not pick up a lot of penalties in races. It doesn't make you impervious to penalties. Sometimes the circumstances of the race or just the game decides that it doesn't like you very much on that occasion, means that you will pick up the occasional contact penalty no matter what you do, no matter what technique you employ. It is the nature of the beast at the end of the day. But I'm pretty sure that if you start employing some of these techniques here, if you're a driver that's having trouble with picking up contact penalties, maybe for you know, the ones that you feel harsh for tapping other drivers in the rear end or getting involved in other people's accidents, that some of the techniques in here should be able to maybe start making a difference to your driving, minimise those kind of penalties that you're picking up, and then hopefully start making you progress up through the ranks. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. Hopefully the video has been useful in some way, shape or form. Let me know in the comments what you think. Hopefully I'll get some stories in the future of people having used these techniques to improve their driving. That would be great to hear. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye now.